that's the interesting thing about these three guys. But they all three seem to me to be excellent prospects. So that's what's going to make this decision interesting. It's going to be fun to watch what we actually do there.
Pop, what's going on, man?
Son, how you doing?
Doing good. I'm in my Sunday red for the Genesis Invitational. Final day today. As we're recording this, you guys will know the outcome tomorrow, but that's certainly where I'm headed after we're done recording this podcast. It's right in my backyard, a few minutes up the road, but can't get in there without a serious fee that, like, comment, subscribe if you want to see me at Riviera Country Club. That's the only way we're getting there anytime soon.
You'll take donations to your Venmo, right?
I will take donations if we have any Riviera members that would like to bring us on. We'll happily shoot some content out there. Crazier things have happened. Put it out there. But anyways, if you guys want to see the meanest 115 shot on Riviera ever. Anyways, let's get into it. The lots of good stuff to talk about. This is our first off-season official pod for the Commanders this year, season 2, getting going. Obviously, Super Bowl long in our rearview mirror now, and it's all about the off-season. It's all about how the Commanders are rebuilding. We're going to talk some quarterback later on in the pod. Right now, we're going to start off with some coaching staff stuff. Just kind of give a quick recap / report, highlights, that kind of vibe. But Pop, where are you at? How you feeling?
Feeling good, son. Feeling good. Waiting on a Dommy scouting report to give us the breakdown of the coaches, and then I'll chime in.
All right, let's do it. I wanted to give you the opportunity. It's a lot of Dommy to start the pod. So I want to give you the opportunity, but Pop's feeling soft spoken today, so we'll jump into it. So we got, obviously, Quinn, head coach, talked about that for forever. In that offense, you guys have already heard about the Cliff Kingsbury hire. We did retain Tavita Pritchard as quarterbacks coach. That was a young, bright, exciting mind, but we were kind of wondering what was going to happen. I like that. We also brought in Brian Johnson and Bobby Johnson. So Bobby Johnson, offensive line coach for the Bills, went over with the Giants when the Giants had that wild card year. He was with them then, and then I guess last year was abysmal. So a little bit of interesting stuff there, but they were hurt. Like, most of that line was hurt. So we'll see about that one. Brian Johnson from the Eagles, obviously was the Eagles offensive coordinator, is now going to be assistant head coach as well as offensive pass game coordinator. And Anthony Lynn, another big name brought in on the offense, run game coordinator, running backs coach, kind of bringing that Shanahan run style into this offense. On the defensive side of the ball, Joe Witt Jr., we have already discussed as defensive coordinator. And then Ryan Kerrigan is going to be staying around. That'll be great. That's pretty much it for the Darryl Tapp on the defensive line, former Redskin, going to be staying in the building or entering the building, I guess, as a coach now.
Ken Norton Jr. is a big name.
Yeah, Ken Norton Jr.
is a big name, former
Good
star linebacker in the league, and I think he played for the Niners and the Cowboys. And then, he was a DC. So
yeah. So lots of big names across.
Maybe a little bit more focus on that linebacker position, as you mentioned on the last pod, being a priority. So
can only go up from where it's been the last 4 years, right?
Yeah.
So the good news is Johnson talk is back, baby. Johnson talk is back and in full effect.
A lot of Johnsons.
So that's hype. A lot of Johnsons. They got every B period Johnson they could, except for one. And I think, looking at the way this staff shaped up, I think dodged a bullet on that, because we have put together a hell of a staff under Quinn, and you got to believe that because of Quinn and because of Peters, this staff, that's the only reason this staff is possible. And you hear a lot of guys talk about, I've been waiting for the opportunity to work with Dan Quinn. Finally, it came up, and I jumped at it. You heard Kingsbury talk about that. And just guys across the league, Anthony Lynn with obviously that San Francisco tie-in. These big names. Lynn was a guy, if you look back for our offensive coordinator hires, Lynn was a guy that was I was 1A, 1B on Bieniemy with Lynn, and I think a couple of times I'd even said, "Hey, I think I might like Lynn better for that offensive coordinator job." So to bring him in as an assistant and to have him focus on what he does really well, which is that run game, that is that is super exciting. And then obviously, I think the big theme here is experience and quarterback development. I think those are
Yeah,
the two big themes we're seeing on the offensive side of the ball. You've got Brian Johnson, who was a head coaching candidate all but 7, 8 weeks ago, took some head coaching interviews anyways. Um, Developed, obviously, did a lot of work with developing Hurts, has ties to, I believe, Dak Prescott as well. And then you have Cliff Kingsbury, known as kind of the quarterback whisperer there. It's just great. And Tavita
yeah,
Pritchard staying around. It's a lot of cool stuff. And there's also a clear succession plan on the offensive side of the
yeah,
ball, right? With that defensive minded coach, you see he's not going to make that same mistake twice about letting Shanahan out of the building and then bringing in somebody completely different. He's got it set up. But Pop, that's the scouting report. Drop it on me. Let me know what you're
love it,
thinking.
love it. Love the Dimey scouting reports. Any chance we can do it? It's not just about football. We'll break down staff for you. The kid's just an all-star. But I think I didn't realize that Brian Johnson was an assistant head coach. I missed the memo on that. It's pretty interesting,
It
given
is.
that, it's not Kingsbury, it's Johnson. So they threw a little bit of extra responsibility his way. Generally, I just think it definitely looks good on paper in terms of the level of experience and the people that we bring across. Um, I know the biggest question mark is probably around Bobby Johnson, although I guess they asked Kingsbury about him, and he highlighted that Giants first year and some of the work he
Yeah.
did in Buffalo as being positives. I like that Pritchard sticking around. He seems to be a really talented young coach. So on offense, I like that thing that there's a succession plan in place, and we'll get into our takeaways on the pressers that Kingsbury and Witt had. But yeah, and then defensively, I mean, I would say not the big name guys, that you see on offense, but definitely I was impressed with what Witt had to say in his presser, and yeah, it seems a super solid staff for sure.
Yeah, and a great transition there, Pop, in the pressers. You're looking at the defense, and I agree there aren't as many big names on the defense as there are on the offense. However, I think that there's two factors there. One, just such an offensively minded league at this point with fantasy football and with gambling and all that kind of stuff. We know the names of everybody on offense because that's just something we're always thinking about, right? Defense just never gets that kind of shine. Two, there's another pretty big name in charge of the defense, and that guy's name is Dan Quinn, right? So that's
Right.
another. Of course, we're not going to need as many big names on the defensive side of the ball because our head coach has been made a head coach because of his defensive expertise, among other things. But that's one of the first lines on that resume, right? Um, and my third point being, what more do you need than Joe Witt Jr. out of that press conference? I mean, what
Yeah.
an all star! What an all star! And we've won the press conference before. This time last year, we were talking about just how impressive Eric Bieniemy was in the pressers, and obviously we know how that turned out, but man, Joe Witt Jr. really impressed me, and there was a level of authenticity and humility to what he talked about, and you can tell for me those like flashy lines, like arriving at the ball violently and stuff like that. You could tell those aren't things that he's practiced and come up with. That's just Joe Witt Jr. That's just he like
Yeah.
the stuff that's sticking out is sticking out because he's just such a stud.
Yeah, I think, it was interesting for me because I hadn't seen a lot of Joe Witz Jr. or known a lot about him until we were introduced to him as DC, but he was very soft spoken
Yeah.
in some of the interviews that I had heard from him. And so to see him come out on fire and really fired up and talk about what he wanted. And what I was impressed by both coaches is talking about how the evolution is so important. Kingsbury kind of pushed back on the air raid offense. He said what we're doing is really not associated with the air raid offense, although he, gave a lot of deference to it in terms of its past and the influence that it's had on him. And I
Yeah,
think by bringing, Johnson in as a running backs coordinator, it shows that he's looking for that different input and maybe to
Lynn,
have
you
a little
mean?
bit more balance. Lynn, sorry. Yeah, you're right. And having a little bit more balance in the offense. And yeah, and then Witt talked about it as well, the importance of evolving, not getting stuck on a style, the difference between the defense they had in Seattle along with Dan Quinn versus what they ran in Dallas. Nobody's really talking about that, but that there's an evolution there of trying to match your coaching to your players. And I think both coaches talked about that, which was, I feel like, the right the right words anyway. And then maybe, leading into our next topic, although we could close on the presser stuff, is that Kingsbury pretty strong tell when he talked about what do you want in a quarterback, and he said that guy in Kansas City is pretty good.
Yeah,
So obviously someone that he's coached before, Pat Mahomes at Texas Tech, but also, who has the most comparisons to Pat Mahomes of the last couple of years in the draft? It's Caleb Williams. So it kind of created that buzz and that link there as well, which will be the next topic we get into.
yeah. So that's I think that's pretty much it on
Yeah,
coordinator talk. I'll say I was pretty I wasn't particularly blown away by Kingsbury's presser. You could tell the guy's been a head coach before and knows how to go there and not give you any sound bites and go home, which was clearly his agenda there.
right.
I think Cliff Kingsbury wants to just focus on the X's and the O's and stay out of the media, which I think is exactly what he should be doing for a guy in his position right now and
Yeah,
for an offensive coordinator. So let's talk about that quote there from Kingsbury, and let's transition that into our main topic for today, which is what do we do at quarterback? What should we do? What will we do? And you said, he. I think one thing that was poignant that I think stuck out a little bit more than people give it credit for was when he was asked about Caleb Williams. He basically said, "Great leader." Next question. And I think the fact that he chose to point out the leadership when that's the number one thing that guys are questioning from Williams is kind of his off the field antics. Oh, he paints his nails. Oh, he cries with his mom. The kind of personality questions. The fact that he chose to say something about his personality and then move on, I thought that was kind of interesting. But it all comes back to that one question of, like you said, he wants a guy that can create with his legs, move outside the pocket, act like Pat Mahomes. What do we do at quarterback? Should we trade up for Caleb Williams? What would you pay? Um, what do we do if we stay? All those kinds of things. So let's get into it, Pop. Let's start at the top. Do you trade up for Caleb Williams?
well, I'm gonna, get into that, and I'm gonna throw a scenario at you because I think you're much more at the, Caleb Williams, being head and shoulders above the other prospects in the draft. And I
Yeah,
respect that. I mean, that seems to be more of the consensus than not. But for me, I think it's really about, it's maybe as much to do with what they think about Caleb as much as they think about the other two prospects, right? And we talked about, hey, in a different year, any one of these three guys might be the number one player picked in the draft. So, what is the coaching staff? They know a lot more than I do about prospects and breaking down tape. What would they think about, either May or Daniels as quarterback for the Commanders? And if they really feel like Caleb Williams is just head and shoulders better, I don't want them to make a publicity move. I hope that that's, not the case in terms of being a local kid and creating buzz and making a big splash. Don't do it for that reason. But if you're in that love with the player, I'm going to trust in the process. I'm going to trust in Adam Peters and Kingsbury and Dan Quinn and that brain trust that determine what's the best move. Now you need a dancing partner too. That's the
yeah,
reality. Chicago doesn't want to trade him, or they're asking for a ridiculous amount to trade him, which early indications indicate, then that could dictate things too. So I think it's as much about how you evaluate the second and third guys, Daniels and May, and maybe somebody that you might like later in the draft. That's as much to do with do you go after Caleb or not. But let me throw a scenario at you.
do
So the
it.
price is our number one this year, our number one next year, and our two number twos this year to trade up. Do you do it?
Yeah, I mean,
Because I think that's the range we're talking about.
yeah,
That's what
I
my gut
agree.
tells me. I think
I
that's
agree.
the
I think it's
price.
going to be 2 1s and some second or third rounders for sure. I don't know that it'll be both seconds this year, but let's say that's the price. I'd do it. Personally, I haven't gotten super deep into like really evaluating these guys yet, and that's something I plan on doing. I was already texting you about how I've been watching film from last season just to kind of scratch the itch. And I'm a I'm not the biggest film junkie in the world, but I do enjoy it from time to time. When I need to take a break from watching golf, I throw on some all 22s, and I like kind of breaking it down and understanding it on a deeper level, and maybe watching some guys that have done it at the pro level, break it down for me, that kind of thing. Um, but right now, my answer would be yes, because what I want, I've said it from the beginning, what I want is our front office to attack. Attack what you think is that number one option. So if I'm our front office and I want us to attack, I think that number one option is Caleb. So if that's being made available to me, I'm going to go get it. And that's what I want to see from the front office. And I want to bring up something that's giving me a bit of pause here with this whole thing is the I understand bringing in Kingsbury because of his ability to develop quarterbacks and his ability to make young quarterbacks shine. I understand and I appreciate that. And I also understand the insight that he will have on May and Williams, particularly because of his connections at the collegiate level in his previous positions. However, I don't want to give Kingsbury more than like 25% weight, if that, in this decision. I want, Peters and Quinn and Harris, I want them three on the same page. And then Kingsbury, dude, it's your job to make it work with what the front office picks, in my opinion. And I think if the front office has real pause about giving up those assets for Caleb Williams or a guy like Jaden Daniels who takes a lot of hits, that kind of thing, or a guy like Drake May who's maybe not so great under pressure, I don't love letting Cliff Kingsbury override that or be a strong voice in that decision making. Because let's be honest here, this is a guy that's got to redeem himself. This is a guy that,
Yeah.
like last time he coached in the NFL, booked a one-way ticket to Thailand at the end of the season. Like, no disrespect to him and his ability, but I want this coming from the front office. I just want to say that once because I haven't heard anybody else say that, and I just
Well,
want to
yeah.
I
There's
want
a
to put
lot
that
of.
out
I
there.
mean, there's a lot of opinions, right? There's even Brian Johnson and Tavita
Yeah,
Pritchard that you should be hearing from. Ultimately, it's got to be Adam Peters that collects all this information and all this
yeah,
data. He's going to be the one that has to make this call. I think it's
hundred
his
percent.
decision at the end of the day. I think hopefully they're strategically on board. We're all convinced it's going to be a quarterback. I think it'd be a shocking move if it wasn't. And I guess that'd be my takeaway. I think you made a strong argument for it. I'm not going to debate that or refute that. Knowing what I know right now, I don't think I would give that up. But again, I think it really comes down to how do you evaluate the other two guys. And ultimately, I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to give these guys the benefit of the doubt. If they were to make that trade, I'm going to get on board with it and be excited about it. I think if I was going to give a quick attempt at a scouting report, and this is more from what I hear than what I see, because I have to admit I haven't really broken it down, but I've read a lot about the evaluations of these three players. I think
100%.
Caleb Williams is the overall talent, right? I mean, there's just no doubt he can do it all. He's just got the ability to make those off schedule plays, to run the packet presence. He's just got that Patrick Mahomes esque vibe to him. Not saying he can beat Pat, but he's got that vibe to him. Daniels is exciting in that he's can do it with his legs. He's shown a great ability to do it with his arm out of the pocket. Little slight of frame, and hasn't sustained that excellence for a long period of time. But if you were going to talk about who played the best ball last year, it's clearly Daniels, right?
Yeah,
And then Drake May is the kind of kid that you just think if you're just going to design a quarterback in a lab, that classic NFL quarterback, he's going to come out of it. But we haven't necessarily seen him perform consistently at a level that you would just go, wow, he's the guy, right? So that's the interesting thing about these three guys, but they all three seem to me to be excellent prospects. So that's what's going to make this decision interesting. It's going to be fun to watch what we actually do there.
Yeah, 100%. I think if we do bring Jaden Daniels in, they do have a nutrition department down at FedEx, but I think we're going to have him and Emmanuel Forbes. We're going to bring him in, and it's going to be a weekly
Maybe
pasta
you
dinner.
can get in there too because you can beef up a little bit. You and
Uh,
the Ravens insider will get
Look,
in
man,
that program.
let's be glad these shots are from the neck up. I don't
You
think
getting
there's
the dad bod going?
any more beefing that needs to be done over here. Uh, yeah, still haven't defeated the science of metabolism slowing down after 25 yet. Thought I had it
Oh
for a
my
year,
god.
but anyways, uh, let's yeah, I think Daniels, man, for me, I got him over May. I don't have him over May by much. The thing that is moving the needle for me on Daniels is that we see a guy who I don't care the fact that he's played 5 years of college ball. What I care about is that such consistent improvement. And you see a guy that is headed, we're picking him up at the top of his trajectory right now. Whereas
Yeah.
Williams, granted, disaster at USC last year. And I think you can say he was running around like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to play hero ball 24/7 because basically, if you don't get the first down, your opponent's going to go score 7 points. That's what the situation was at USC last year. But plateaued, maybe even dropped off. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Dropped off a bit from where he was the year before. Drake May, same thing, kind of dropped off a little bit, plateaued a little bit. Now, granted, these guys are all head and shoulders better prospects, more talented than Sam Howell was coming out of college. But we just did that dance last year, didn't we? Of the guy that was really highly regarded and then dropped off a little bit, it's a different story. But for me, if I gotta split hairs on that number two pick, which I really think it is splitting hairs, I'm going Jaden Daniels because of that trajectory, the way he shot up the board. You saw obviously Malik Neighbors is a stud, but somebody had to throw him that football, right? And somebody had to use his legs to give him those opportunities and to create to make the defense kind of hold him accountable, and then he can fling it downfield to Malik Neighbors. So I'm big on Jaden Daniels here. I like the ability to create with his legs. I think I would I think after the pro days, if they go the way I anticipate them to go, maybe I'm going to end up more in the camp of we should take Daniels at 2 and save those assets that we would lose for Williams if he's going number 1 overall. But I also think there might be some serious conversation after these pro days of is Jaden Daniels the guy that should be going number 1 overall?
Yeah, I that might be a stretch, but I definitely feel like Daniels to me, if you if you operate under the assumption that Caleb Williams is going first and he won't be on the table and we decide not to trade up, Daniels for me fits the profile more of what we've seen successful young quarterbacks and successful quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yep.
He just fits that profile, and it is exciting how dynamic he might be able to be with his legs too. And so it seems like a humble kid and all those things. So I would tend to agree, based on what I know, I'd lean Daniels at this time, and I'd even lean sticking and going with Daniels over trading up. But
Yeah.
again, I'm gonna trust the process. But speaking of Sam, because you opened the door there. What role do you think Sam Howell should have in the situation? So we're just going to operate under the scenario we draft a quarterback number 1. How do you handle that situation in this offseason? Is it an open competition? Are you clearly saying he's the backup? What's your approach? And then I'll give you what I think we should do there.
It's like a should and will, right? What should happen is we say, hey, we took Jaden Daniels number 2 overall, or we took Drake May number 2 overall. He's our starting quarterback. Caleb proved a lot and has shown he can be, at minimum, a very competent backup in the league. Or, excuse me, Sam proved a lot, showed he can be at minimum a very competent backup in the league last year. So we're going to let him be our backup, especially because fifth round draft pick, cheap, whatever. And he's proven that he can come in and finish the game for you if you need. We're going to have him as our backup quarterback. That's what should happen. What will happen is they'll bring the guy in. They'll say open competition. We want to compete. We know that that's Dan Quinn's thing is competition, and he only wants to bring guys in who want to compete. And it's going to be like the Ryan Fitzpatrick, Taylor Heineke quarterback competition. At the end of the day, you're going to start that guy that got drafted number 2 overall. That's what I think is going to happen.
What a comparison.
How
I
about
think
that?
so. Here's what I think. I like that one. Very left field. Um, I think here's what I think. One thing I think. I think it really depends on which way Dan Quinn wants to go with this, and I think Dan Quinn will have the biggest influence and the biggest stamp on this. From it, he could make it an open competition. And if Sam, which I think is a very real possibility at this stage, I mean, you can't forget Sam's got what 18 games under his belt as a starter, 2 years in the NFL. It would not be a shock if he looks like the better quarterback, in this offseason, right? Now they're both
Yeah.
quarterbacks going to be learning a new offense, but he's already had to do that twice in his career. So he's got experience doing that. So it would not be a shock if Sam, and he could be loose, no pressure. He's already Sam's somebody's got his feet on the ground, right? He's already talked about the fact that he knows he's a fifth round quarterback and he appreciated the opportunity he got. So I think he's a realistic kid. He's not a kid that's going to dwell on the fact that, they drafted a QB and now I'm number 2. He's just going to compete his ass off. I think that's the kind of character he is with very little pressure to no pressure on his back now. And I think that we could see him really, really look good in this offseason because, as we've talked before, there were periods of time that he looked really damn good as a starting quarterback in this league, right? Leading the lead in passing at that halfway point, right? And was it Sam or was it coaching that really caused that crash at the end? Probably a bit of both. So I think there's a scenario that, again, depends on which way Dan Quinn wants to roll. That if he wants to say to his, second pick in the draft, hey, look, learn behind it. We're going to give you a chance. We're going to give you some breathing room. We're going to give you a few games to learn behind Sam. Maybe that's not a terrible scenario to go through. And if you're using Pat Mahomes as your blueprint for this, Pat's out of here. He's out of here.
That's such
So,
a different situation, though.
but I think that Sam could make this thing interesting. I really do. Not that I think that obviously if you draft somebody that high that early, they're going to play. So if he's holding it down, he's just holding it down for a few games. And I don't think at the end of the day Sam is going to light the world on fire. He can be competent and he can hold that down. But it may give this coaching staff. This is really my point. It's not Sam Howell hype because that ship has sailed. It's more he could give this coaching staff a bit of luxury to let that rookie sit a little while and learn. So I think it'll be interesting. I guess is my point.
All right, I don't know.
You're not convinced at
I don't
all.
agree. I don't agree. I think if you're drafting a guy number 2 overall, I mean, if you want somebody to compete with Sam, trade back, take JJ McCarthy, and get a tackle while you're at it. Like
You got
I
to make
don't.
sure the kid's ready, though. We know Sam can start in this league. You have to make sure you got to do the right thing by this rookie. If the
I don't
kid's
know that.
ready and he clearly looks better, play him. I'm good with that. But if
I
he's
don't want
not,
to. I don't want to turn this into a Sam Howell debate. I will just say Pop is the one who said we know Sam Howell can start in this league. I don't know if we know Sam Howell can start in this league at this point. I'm going to leave it at that.
Sam
I
Howell is your Taylor Heineke to me.
Yeah, I think so. I I don't think I think the Mahomes situation was so different because you have a guy in Alex Smith who was playing MVP level football, and you have a team that was already winning and in good shape before when they got Mahomes. So I think that's a completely. It's like if you want to learn behind a heady vet, you know, if like I would almost be more in favor of him sitting behind Brissett than I would be behind Howell. But that's a totally different
Yeah, I
conversation that
completely disagree with you
I don't
there
want to get
because I think
into.
you also need to know where you're at as a team, and this is a rebuild. Yeah, it's a rebuild that we hope shows quick progress, but roll with the young guys because you got an opportunity, and I do think that I'm higher on the prospects of Sam being
Significantly.
a starting caliber quarterback in this league, or at least a hell of a great backup quarterback in this league. I think that what my eyes saw last year at certain points of that season and just how poor the coaching was, I think that to completely rule that out, I'm talking about being a possibility. I'm not predicting that it's a done deal, but I think shutting the door on that possibility based on what we saw, I don't think makes sense to me.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to completely shut the door on the possibility, which is why I'm not saying don't trade him, which is why I'm not saying that we should trade him, excuse me. Because yeah, there's a chance that we take this guy number 2 overall and he's a bust, right? And then we got to go somewhere. But I think you said it. It's a rebuild that we hope can go faster than we wanted to. And there's nothing that accelerates a rebuild faster than a stud quarterback. We saw it in Cincinnati. We saw it in Indy last year for a brief period of time before Richardson got hurt. We saw it in Houston last year. Saw it in Philly with Hurts when they were in no man's land, and then Hurts finally gets to start for a year. There is nothing that can get a team with clear deficiencies out of that 4-13, 6 and whatever hell that we're stuck in right now. There's nothing that gets them out of that faster than a quarterback. And if we're drafting a guy at number 2
But
overall, it should be because he's that guy.
you're I don't think you're it doesn't feel like to me you're really hearing my point. You're taking it as a defending Sam. I don't think there's any doubt that three's got three guys are better prospects than Sam Howell. Let me be clear on that. Did you hear me? I don't think
Yes.
there's any doubt that these three guys are better prospects than Sam Howell. I'm doing it for the good of the club and the good of the player. That's what I'm talking about. That if they're not ready, and we've seen the benefit of guys sitting, there's many examples. Top of the list, right, is Pat. So that's all I'm saying. That it gives them a little bit of a luxury to do that if they judge it to be the best thing for the player and for the team.
We'll
That's all
see.
I'm saying. I'll leave it
We'll
there.
see. I think the key difference
You're
there
totally
is
against it. I get it. Maybe
I'm
pops out of left
totally.
field. Let us
It's a
know in the
little out of left
comments
field.
which side of that you're on. We get a lot of comments of people wanting to stick with Sammy. We do get a lot of comments of
We do, and you'll be able to figure out pretty quickly which one of us is replying based
that.
off of the content there. But yeah, again, if we had a good, solid, heady veteran for the guy to sit behind and learn, it would maybe change my opinion a little bit. But we
Hey, you
don't.
disrespect Sam.
Sam is not a solid, heady veteran. Sam's a guy that
He's
barely,
closer to that than these rookies will be.
yeah, by the skin of his polinas, but fine. Uh, Anyways, I mean, 18 starts on a 4-13 team. Sure, he's closer to a heady veteran, but he
I
ain't
think the
Alex Smith.
bigger I think the bigger point of all this to put a bow on it, I just think it's going to be so fun to watch. We
It'll
don't
be
know.
interesting.
That's the bottom line. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen, who they're going to pick at quarterback, how it's all going to play out. But it's just going to be really fun to watch. And
It
I
will
think
be.
that's the thing to look forward to.
And Pop threw me for a curveball. I had a curveball ready for you, Pop, but that your curveball out curved mine. Let's put it that way. I'll save my curveball for another episode.
Let's do
I
it.
wasn't I wasn't ready for Sam Howell starting 2024 talks, but
It was on the agenda. It was
it
on the
was on the
agenda.
it was on the
What did
agenda.
the
I
agenda
wasn't.
say?
It was on the agenda. I wasn't ready for 8 minutes of it, and you to feel as strongly as you feel about it. I thought it was going to be a quick, hey, no, let's move on. But it's cool. Hey, that's what we're here for. Let's wrap this thing up, man. Without further ado, I've been Dom.
This is Pop.
Thanks for watching, guys.